allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the first item on our agenda is an accolade for one of our high school students, but I don't see him here yet, so we're going to move on and then we can jump back should he arrive. I think he's too busy studying his science, maybe, to make it here. First order of business is public comment. I believe there is no public comment. Is that correct, Diana? Okay, perfect. Moving on, we will start with Item 5A on the agenda, a presentation from the Warren Prevention Coalition giving their health and wellness survey results. Welcome.
I am the program director for the Warren Prevention Coalition. I'm here tonight with the coordinator, who is Maria Ursini, and our evaluator, who's John Matson. We're in the 5th year of our drug-free community grant, and this is our fourth health and wellness survey that we've done. Maria's passing out these folders. On one side, you'll find our community newsletter, and on the other side, you'll find a copy of our health and wellness surveys, some of the talking points. John is going to come up here and he's going to explain some of those talking points because he has the expertise in those. I don't. So once again, John Matson, our evaluator. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. According to the terms of the Drug-Free Communities grant that we've had here in Bristol Warren, you have to collect data, what they call national outcome measures, as part of a national evaluation. The process has been going on over 20 years now. They look at certain factors that, through research, they found are more telling as far as risk and protection. So the ones we looked at in our survey, and the survey we have has been approved by the federal government as well as the state, is to focus on those tonight, the main issues that were there and what we've seen. Now, remember that some of the data we're going to see tonight is after 2 years of COVID and the restrictions that came with that, we're limiting to the kids in different ways, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. But in any event, the national outcome measures that we look at are past 30-day use, what they also call current use. We also do a lifetime use thing here just for this community. I ask them if they've ever used a certain substance or not. And we did collect the data for grades 6 through 12. Okay, that's another thing. Then we look at perception of risk for harm. Like how much do the students think that a certain substance would harm them if it was used at certain levels, either daily or once in a while, those kind of things. Then we look at peer disapproval and parental disapproval, which are other factors we know that peer influences. We also look at then the students' perception of their peers using. That's when I like to kind of back up to see how much matches with what they perceive their peers saying. Then we ask other questions about access. How do you access marijuana? How did you access alcohol if you were using in the last 30 days? Because most of the kids weren't. I mean, I got to say right up front, remember that, and I tell everybody this, you might have some people that use, but most of the kids do not. Okay. But in any event, let's take a look if everybody's got their fact sheet or infomercial. What do you call these? I guess infomercials. We had this time around, we had 1,047 students complete the survey. That's roughly 70% of the middle and high school kids that we had. And that number is actually lower than we have in the past gotten. And the main reason was the 12th grade students. We only got like a 30% return rate from them. I don't know if they were already out doing other things or whatever. It all took place in November. The high school was November 3rd. and the middle school we did November 28th. And then they had a few days after that for students who were not there that day to finish up, and we did get a few stragglers came back in. In any event, it was about, the breakdown was about 54% middle school students and 46% high school students, which means it's skewed a little bit towards younger students, the results. And that's basically because the 12th graders were a lower number. However, the state of Rhode Island says for the risk survey and the others they do, that 60% return rate is what they anticipate having, and we got about 70%. And the past surveys we've had from 75 to 80%. So we always get really good cooperation. The students have been good at taking it. When I do a check, I look at, we clean the data, so I make sure that any students that didn't answer most of the questions or put in just straight line, I used everything possible things or gave multiple responses, those surveys are kicked out. I think we had like 13 of those, 12 or 13, which is actually a very low number for something like this. The margin of error from the numbers I'll be giving you, that is about 4% for the whole thing, which is pretty typical for what we're looking at, a 95% confidence interval. But anyway, past 30-day use, the middle school students really very low, except for two things, and that was vaping and alcohol for 7th and 8th graders. Especially for the vaping seems to be a bigger thing. It was a high number that I haven't seen for 7th and 8th graders, that 6% said that they had a drink in the last 30 days. In the past years, we've had like 1%, 2%. So I'm not sure how accurate that number is, but consider that the kids were at home more and often unsupervised. That opportunity to have a drink here and there occurs. And most of them say anyway that when they do drink, it's from someone's house. It's not out buying it at a liquor store or going to a bar. It's either at their home, or with or without parent permission, or at a friend's house where either no one's home or they're having a party. Those are the main venues for alcohol that students are showing up. Some go and they take their cars and go in the woods and things, but most of the time, but we don't see that with the middle school. In the high school, the number one drug is marijuana. But that said, I mean, in recent years, the rate, this is for 12th graders use rate here, and alcohol, marijuana is at 13%, alcohol was at 12%. The time before, alcohol was at 46%, and marijuana was over 30%. So, we've seen some shifts, and I'm a little cautious with this data because we'll have to see how it comes out next year too, to see how much the time out of school impacted them. One of my hypotheses with this is that when they don't have social contacts that they get at school, they don't have as much opportunity outside of school to access things. And the kids told us, we did focus groups at the middle school and high school, and they pretty much told us that when they get something, it's usually from a friend or from an acquaintance that they know and that they text. And this is the other thing about phones in school. Oftentimes they will text people during school to meet them after school or even during school to go vape somewhere, right? And so it's all done with the fingers, In any event, edibles also showed up on the list for the first time, as well as vaping. We don't see as much. The edibles, I don't think they're as popular yet, but they're getting there, especially because they're easier to hide, easier to use, but the students aren't aware that edibles can be extremely potent. They can be up to 90% THC levels we're looking at with some of the edibles now. So, I don't think they're aware of what an edible can do to them. But in any event, that's another kind of warning thing on the horizon coming in the future. These kids are anti-smoking, and across the board, cigarette smoking seems to be very negative, but when you ask them about vaping and using marijuana, they didn't see the same thing. They don't think it's as harmful at all, not nearly. When we look down below, it says perception of risk for harm. We ask them about, and we have core substances we look at: alcohol, marijuana, tobacco in different forms, prescription drug use, meth, heroin, and those kind of things. But there never really has been much of a hard drug use showing up in the maybe 1 or 2 kids. But I know this year, for instance, when we looked at that, it was the same 5 kids in the 11th grade that had given all the same answers. So I kind of suspect that's kind of not very legitimate when they said that. But the numbers are so low, it was below the 4% margin of error. But anyway, you see, interesting enough, the perception of risk for marijuana weekly use, normally these are in the 90s to 95 percentile ranges in different places. Last time around for the students, for the high school students, marijuana is at 53%. Now, what's interesting is actually there was a decline in use, but there was also a decline in seeing that it was dangerous. So that's something that is kind of a interesting dilemma we have to take a look at. I think a lot of it has to do, obviously, because of legalization, because of what they're hearing on Facebook and other social media sites. There's a lot of really bogus information out there, and the kids don't hear truth. So the other thing is, I was shocked to see cigarettes fall down to a lower number, to 63%, because they really are anti-cigarette in most of the ways. But then there is an acceptance, and this is the other thing I've discovered. The kids that don't use really don't mind if others are using. They'll go to a party, and they do feel free enough, most of them, to say no. I don't want to use it, but they don't. They don't pull back and say, well, listen, I'm not going to stay here because these guys are drinking, or these are usually smoking pot, or they're giving me cigarettes. That doesn't scare students away. That's actually considered part of a normal behavior, especially in a social setting. And a lot of the social settings, when we say party, it's not meant to be 50 or 100 people. Parties nowadays are anywhere from like 2 students getting together to maybe 10 students. Smaller numbers, because it's easier to hide and you don't have cars on the street, things like that. So when we ask about the interesting other change that came along, we ask about different things like binge drinking and higher levels of use of marijuana. And for the first time I've ever seen, the grade 10 and 11 students actually had higher rates of binge drinking. Binge drinking meaning 5 or more drinks at one setting, up to twice a week. That's binge drinking by federal definition. So that's an interesting thing. So the 11th grade, 10th and 11th grade students seem to be more active in some ways with substances than the 12th grade students. And one of my thoughts on that is that those were the students that spent 2 years going from 8th grade to 9th grade. And so they really didn't have, the end of middle school experience nor the beginning of high school experience. There was, that opportunity for maturity, did not occur. And the social contacts were so limited that they basically got to talking to each other on internet or through whatever media they use, texting. And that's why we're seeing issues with social adjustments right now coming back to school. Other things that we looked at, the sources of alcohol. We asked the students that did drink, reported drinking, where they got it from. They said at a party with friends was the number one, at home without parents' consent, and then from friends under 21, which is pretty typical for what we've seen in the past access. The marijuana access is a little different. Marijuana comes from a friend or acquaintance, not at a party, purchased from someone they know or someone that knows somebody that knows somebody. It's all about networks in that sense. Got somebody to purchase it for them, and oftentimes that can be an older sibling or older friend or a college student that they might know. And then the first time this has showed up too is got it from someone with a medical card. For years that didn't show up at all, the first years that we had medical marijuana. Now it's starting to show up more, and which suggests that there may be parents or there may be somebody who's getting it and then either leaving it around or offering it to young people. That is medicinal. And obviously medicinal marijuana is also stronger than what they sell as retail marijuana, so recreational. So anyway, what else we got here for you? I don't want to get into everything because there was so much that we asked a bunch of questions. And there's a report that's available that Anne Marie and Maria have. Plus, we add to that the focus group notes that we did. We do focus groups at the middle and high school with different grade levels. And then we put that together and see how that triangulates. Does we agree with what we're doing here? So when we looked at like peer disapproval, now this is the interesting thing. When we asked the kids their perception of their peers' disapproval, reverse a little bit of the other one, the numbers were all in the 90% and above. So that's their perception is their peers do not want them using it, but they are accepting of using it. So there's a kind of an interesting, I don't know, juxtaposition with how that works. But you look here, even at the my school and the high school, over 90% said that their peers were opposed to them drinking, smoking, vaping. And then you look at approval of peer use, which is the other side of the fence of that one. And what we found is, this is 12th grade data, occasional marijuana use had the highest level of peer approval, followed by alcohol and vaping, ENDS product use. Everybody know what ENDS are, by the way? Electronic nicotine delivery systems is what the federal government calls vapes and any kind of electronic cigarette item. And then as far as our impact on parents, now the parents really, once again, the numbers were all for both middle school, every grade, over 90% for pretty much everything. The only place that it fell a little bit was older students and marijuana. But even then, it was still around 85 to 90%. So very high. Their perception of disapproval is extremely high, which tells me they should actually be getting, what's happened is that does suppress use, especially if they're not socializing. These things are clean. But anyway, just to finish up, there are two little things that I want to finish up with. One is we asked the students if they thought the last 2 years with COVID impacting them being at school, being out of the house, being out of school, being in the house more, not being around their peers. We asked them what they thought if that might have increased or decreased or stay the same. And 34% said alcohol was being used more often. 32% said marijuana was being used, 29% edibles, and 40% said there was more vaping going on. Now that's the one I tend to believe more because it's easier to get, plus there are a lot more parents that have vapes, I think, or older brothers and sisters that have them, and they share. Vapes are considered the new social thing. You get together with someone, you vape together. Sports teams even, they've got people in different types of capacity. When they get together, they vape. Most of the time they're vaping nicotine. I'd say about somewhere between 70 to 80% of the time. That's what the students tell us. But the other times they're vaping any kind of marijuana derivative, an oil of some sort. Usually it's a hash oil that they use, or they use dabs. Everybody know what dabs are? Dabs are a very potent form of oils, or called crackle, there's a twinkle, all sorts of different names for it. But these are derivatives from marijuana, and I'm talking in this sense, cannabis would be anywhere from 40 to 99% THC levels. Now, if you realize that typical cannabis that's on the street is probably about 12 to 15%, medicinal probably up to 25 to 30%. So you're talking about some very extreme levels when they start dabbing. Dabbing can also, and this research is showing that dabbing can lead to onsets of paranoia or mental illness. So with the mental illness problems, we got to watch that too. Very last thing is we always ask the students, were you honest on the question when you're answering the questions? Now, interesting enough, over 90% of the students say, yes, of course I was honest answering the questions. But then we ask them, the last question is, what about your peers? Do you think your peers were honest? Well, that came back about 12%. Only 12% of them said their peers were honest. About 35% said, no, they didn't know for sure. But another 30-something percent said, well, most of the time they were, but not always. So that's kind of what we have for the upgrade. The good news is really the numbers have fallen over the last 5 years, the years that you've had the DFC. So I hope that continues, but I'm really interested to see, it will be interesting to see next year what kind of numbers we bring back with a full regular school year. So anybody have any questions? All right, great.
Thank
Well,
you so much. Thank you to all of you for
Hope
the
it's
work
helpful.
that you're doing, because we can't have our children learning well if we're not keeping them safe and healthy. So we really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you. We have to partner in this, so we appreciate it. I'll pause once again and jump at. Yeah, could somebody send that? Maria, you have my email. Could you send me a link to the survey results? Thank you. I'm going to jump back now to the first item, to the item number 3 on our agenda, and I'll ask Mrs. King to come to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am really pleased to be here this evening to be able to recognize a young man who has achieved a perfect score on our next generation science assessment that he took in his junior year, perfect score of 120. Chase Jackson is described as inquisitive with a wide range of interests, excelling in humanities as well as math and science. He is a member of our National Honor Society and recently has been accepted at Northeastern University, Fordham, University of Vermont, and the University of Richmond so far. Congratulations, Chase, and we are very proud of you.
Congratulations, Chase, and to your parents as well, because, you know, well done. Now we are going to move on to item number 5B, the mid-year data review. Dr. Sana?
I'll provide a brief introduction. This evening, we're happy to provide you with an update on our student achievement data. We'll be sharing with you the progress that students have made since our beginning of the year presentation that we did in the fall. What you'll be seeing this evening is the mid-year results from the assessment that was taken in January. And I'd like to invite, oh, they're already up here, great. Chris Slater is our K-8 math coordinator, and Mary Cabral is our K-8 ELA coordinator, and they'll be sharing the results with you. They have been instrumental in working with schools and working with grade level teams, analyzing the data, identifying the best strategies, supporting the implementation of strategies that will best accelerate our student learning. And we have several bright spots in the data tonight from the hard work of teachers along with Chris, Mary, and the principals in setting up acceleration blocks and really focusing on the data and doing everything possible to work with small groups of students and give them more than typical growth, what we refer to as stretch growth, really trying to close those gaps. We still have a ways to go with our proficiency to meet our goal of 75% or higher proficiency by 2027, but we are on our way and we've made some good progress. After Chris and Mary provide an introduction to the district data, the principals will come up and share their school level data as well as improvement strategies that they have underway. And we're happy to address questions along the way or at the end. In the last few pages of your document, you do have some additional information on iReady. For those of you who are new or would like a refresher, we're always available if you want to get more information on the assessment. And I will turn it over to Chris and Mary.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sana, and good evening, everybody. So tonight, Mary Cabral and I will give you an introduction. This evening, we're going to, as Dr. Sana said, provide an update on student achievement based on the results of the iReady middle of the year benchmark assessment, which was given in January of this year in grades K to 8. So the overview of this presentation is, first of all, Mary and I will give you just a brief overview of the district-wide proficiency and growth data so far this year. And then the principals will give you an update on the proficiency and growth at their schools and the steps each of them are taking to continue to improve student outcomes.
Good evening and thank you. I just have to start by saying I'm really excited about the data, and I know that we do have a long way to go, but we're on the right path. And one way that we know that externally is that in the last few days, Dr. Santa was contacted by Curriculum Associates, which is the company who creates iReady and works nationally with students. And they invited us to present at the New England Symposium to reflect on how we're beating the odds. And so when they look at our data, we are one of the schools in New England that are beating the odds. And so that's really exciting. And so I'm just really
Thank you, Mary. I
proud.
totally forgot to say that because it all happened so quickly.
Yes, it just happened. It's hot off the press, but it's just a reflection of how hard students are working and how strategic teachers are being. And so thank you for all you do to support teachers and giving them the resources that they need, making sure that we have the personnel that we need in order to make sure students get where they need to be. So when we're looking at the slide that's in front of you here, these are the different placement levels. And I look at the data a little bit differently. I look through that teacher lens, and really it's a ladder of growth for students. I know a lot of times when we do beginning of the year data, people look at all of the red and yellow and they're alarmed. And to a teacher, it's not alarming because we haven't taught them any of those skills they're assessing right there. They're assessing them on the grade level that they have just entered to see what they know for that grade level. And so it is appropriate for them to be at the beginning of that journey and then to grow as the year progresses toward that middle and above grade level understanding. And that's where we want all of our students to be. So when we're looking at these placement levels, the top there is that dark green, and that's our proficiency measure. That correlates with RICAS, so we really keep our eyes on that, and that's where we're headed by end of year. We really want all students to have the best opportunity to be there because that is the indicator that says they are most likely or highly likely to be proficient on the state assessment, which is a measure to show that they have everything they need to know to progress to the next grade level. When they are early on, I just want to caution you as we move down these placement levels on this screen, it doesn't mean that they don't have many skills that they are proficient with. It just means that strategically, there are a couple of spots where they need some extra practice. And that's true for the yellow as well. A lot of what students need when this is an average, when they place in these placement levels, it's an average overall of how they're performing. And so a couple of key concepts have just pulled down their data a little bit to help teachers understand this child needs help with this skill, that child needs that skill in order to reach that high level of proficiency. And so that's how we as teachers look at that data and understand how to strategically move students from one placement level to another. And so when we look at those two grade levels, when we look at that red area, again, those students have areas of strength. They are not all areas of weakness, but it helps us understand these children need some really systematic, explicit teaching from a specialist, like a reading specialist, a special educator, who's going to give them some really strategic, systematic instruction in a specific skill area. And so this testing really helps us instructionally set our pathway for every single child in order to achieve. And so this is the exciting part. This is how we're beating the odds. Because when we look at the performance, I want to run over to the screen there and point at it because you want to be in the high performing, high growth quadrant. So that rectangle that's in the top corner there of our graph, you see the dotted line in the middle. For English language arts, you need to make sure that the median child in your classroom is at about 67% to be at the national norm. All of our schools, K to 8, are beating the national norm in proficiency and growth. So just take a minute to realize how great that is. And that's why we're considered as schools that are beating the odds, because when we look at our data, we are in the high performing, high growth range when we are compared to national norms. And so this is very positive for us because not all of our schools were traditionally in that quadrant before for reading. And so all of those systematic changes that have been made are really taking hold and helping us grow into a really positive area. And it's so exciting to see right there at the top, we see Colt Andrews. That's a Title I school. And we know the significant challenges that students face, and teachers are able to really strategically help students so that now we're seeing all of our schools, all of their peers are really getting equitable opportunity to grow and respond and be really strong learners. And that's really important for us. So it's just exciting. It's exciting to see Kickapoo Middle School there. I know I'm biased, but whatever, they're there. And it's so exciting. So just take a moment to think about that. And so when we look at the placements, I like to think of it like a bucket. They come in September and the bucket is empty. And it's our job as educators to really fill that bucket and grow that level. And so that's what we're working on. And so that's why when they come in the fall, and some people will say, well, how come there are some students who are in the dark green already? And that's because we differentiate and we work hard to make sure that all students grow at the pace that they're ready for. And that's one thing that iReady does for us. It allows children to work above grade level when they are ready. And so, yes, there are some students that are able to perform above grade level, but it is okay that they begin the grade level with a fresh start, able to begin those standards that are new at that grade level. And so we're growing that. And when you look at this chart, just remember that here, this is representing January. So this is now a couple of months past. So we've had 8 more weeks of learning. And so you would see even more in those dark green and light green areas as we start to shrink the students who need more systematic instruction and also extra practice to have proficiency overall in their average.
And thank you. And you'll see, I'd like to talk to you about the math scores. So looking at our 5 K to 8 schools, we see that as of this January, every one of them exceeded national norms for growth and performance. So just like an ELA, and it's not quite as dramatic as the growth that you saw with the ELA, but that's pretty hard to top. It's something to just take note of, is how exceptional the growth has been for English language arts. Now, but every one of the schools in this district is above the median. The median for the typical growth achieved for the median student in the nation is 61% by the middle of the year, by January. And every school has exceeded that. The median student at every school is higher. And furthermore, they've all exceeded the national norm median performance, which is 50%. So with all the schools in that upper right quadrant, that also speaks to the dedication of the teachers and the administrators and the hard work of the students as well, for all of us to really get together and figure out how to help support these students to get the learning that they need to be proficient. As Mary also said, it is a journey as well. Like, we are all in the right quadrant. We'd love to stay here and continue to work, but we also know that it's not just sitting back on our heels and saying, well, we did it, nice job, everybody. But this rather to say, yes, obviously this is a sign of our good work, and we're going to continue to do that work. So here are how the placements have changed in math for K to 8. You'll see, just as Mary said, that dark green in the beginning of the year, 9% of students were mid or above grade level already. But there's nothing particularly alarming about seeing such a large amount of students who are one grade level below. That's not an unusual place to be when you're beginning a grade and you haven't been taught that content. And it's also, what it's interesting about math as well. I mean, like math as a curriculum does circle back, right? Every year spirals. So we're really building upon the year prior, but it's not just a procedural understanding, it's a conceptual understanding. And building that deep conceptual understanding enables students to then add complexity to their problem solving. And suddenly they develop the ability with instruction and support to start thinking about expanding from whole numbers to parts of a whole, to fractions and decimals, and then being able to operate on those things, and then being able to operate on irrational numbers. When they move on to middle school, I mean, these things, the concepts get more and more complicated, but it all has to start with the firm foundation. We see as well by winter, so this is just 16 weeks into the year, 25% of the students are already mid or above grade level, and another 26% are early on grade level. So there's just a little bit of content, a little bit of push, a little bit of procedural understanding or skill that they need from their teachers to make that little push, right? I think this, one of the great things about the middle of the year assessment as well, is it really is an opportunity for us to kind of reevaluate whether or not we've been successful. How have we succeeded so far? And where do we need to refocus and target our instructional efforts? So as we look at the students, we don't just see a big bar, we see performance for every individual student. And then one of the strengths of our curriculum and assessment is that it enables us to zero in on specific skills and concepts. So when I say, oh, I'm about to teach lesson 21, I can look in the software and it will tell me which students need additional support and which lessons and activities will give those students those supports to help them get what they need so that they can reach and become proficient at grade level material. So this is the process that we do when we assess at this middle of the year, is just another opportunity for us to reevaluate and say, how can we then target the students who need extra support? How can we focus our efforts, enable them to get the things they need so they can be proficient, and then provide extra support for those students who have exceptional needs or have unfinished learning that we really need to address before they can succeed at the core. So at this point, we would like to let the principals begin to come up and talk to you about the performance and growth at their schools. The first principal will be Deborah Kearns from Colt Andrews. So I invite you to come up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the proud principal of Colt Andrews. Nice to see everyone tonight. Okay, Chris. So our first slide is Colt Andrews ELA scores. For proficiency, we're at 42% at the middle of the year, up from 36% at the beginning of the year. So great gains there. As you can see, every grade level has shown growth, and we're extremely proud that our students who needed to close the achievement gap in red has decreased from 14 to 4%. Pretty good, huh? Okay. Next, we'll move on to math. So here we are at 30% proficiency, which is the dark green with lines. And we're 25% is oh so close. So we're working hard with them. Our K and 5 are the two highest scores, highest grades with the highest scores. And we're extremely proud again to have closed the achievement gap, we're beginning to, from 16% to 6% in math. Again, a great accomplishment. But we have lots of work to do. Okay, so we have some action steps to increase proficiency. First thing is to prioritize our differentiated instruction block during the acceleration block. That's new for us this year. And with the help of our math coaches and Chris, we're able to differentiate instruction on a daily basis. And students have acceleration every day. Next, I want to focus on attendance and use the Bristol Warren tiers of intervention for reducing chronic absences, aiming at improving school-wide attendance. A goal of mine. Continue with Title I funded tutoring. We have fall tutoring before school, and we have spring tutoring before school as well. And that's where we're able to target many of those yellow students, those fence sitters, to move them toward proficiency. We want to ensure we have fidelity to the HMH curriculum and providing ongoing support and implementation with the support of our coaches. Increase fidelity to MTSS, work with Dr. D and Bridge RI. Intensified focus on math professional learning, especially with iReady. Continue with HMH professional development. Provide opportunities to have formative classroom walkthroughs with teachers. And presently we work with Mickey O'Connell from RIDE, and we do walkthroughs for mathematics with teachers and classroom teachers, regular ed teachers, and special educators. And that's happening tomorrow. And one last thing is opportunities for scoring, benchmarking, and calibration of student work in reading and math. What that means is we want students to be able to know what a 4 looks like. That would be representative on a RICAS. So getting student work samples, and students can analyze work. They get to calibrate them against a rubric, whether it's a rubric from HMH or a RICAS rubric. And actually our 5th graders are doing that currently. And they really like it. They really like it. So that is Colt Andrews in a nutshell. Do you have any questions? You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Hughes, Gutierrez School Principal. I am pleased to share our middle of the year data in iReady. So our English language arts data, we start off the year combining the 2 greens in the beginning of the year. The 14 and 18% of our students were ready to start their year. They had the strong footing, and at middle of the year, they were all proficient, the 32%. So what that means is that 27% of our students that were in yellow in the beginning of the year have moved on over to getting their sure footing in their grade level material. We know that historically that students who are performing at mid and mid-level at the middle of the year in iReady typically will be performing proficiency in the RICAS state testing, which we're going to be starting next week in the elementary grades. So if we look to the students that we're trying to close the gap for, we started our year at 18%, and working with our professionals, we have 8% of our students are still needing some intensive support, which are 2 or more years below. In mathematics, the Gutierrez students, we started off with a sure footing of 23%. That was the combination of the 2 greens in the beginning of the year, and that is where they are. We're at a solid footing of 23% proficiency at middle of the year. So, which that means that looking at our students in the beginning of the year, we have moved 23% again into the beginning of the year of their grade level.
So this, interestingly, I love numbers. So we have a lot of 23s in this slide, which is quite fascinating to me. So our mathematics reduction intensity from the beginning of the year was 17%, and at middle of the year, we're proud to be down to 6% of students who still need intensive work. That we're closing the gap for many different reasons. We have been looking at systems in place to figure out how can we hone in on things, and that's where my next slides of our action steps. So in order to make sense of our data, we need to make time to make sense of data. And the school day is a very busy school day. So creating a schedule to make time for this is paramount. And what the time blocks that we are focusing on at Gutierrez and trying to use them more wisely. So just getting this structure in place is to help us prioritize our acceleration block. The acceleration block is an additional block from our core program. So core ELA and core mathematics is taught within a certain time frame. And then we have an additional block of time to be able to accelerate students. And using that time wisely is important, but that takes a lot of planning because it is differentiated. We try to use other resources in our building, other staff members to work that time wisely. So my action step is to make that a little bit more streamlined, more efficient now that we're getting the schedule in place. That also takes place, that time is important for our multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS. And this is something that's been going on. It used to be called RTI in our district for quite some time, but now we're being more reflective of it. We just did an audit which used a tool, a normed tool led by Dr. DiBiase, that we were really reflective of like, oh, we thought we were doing great at all these things, but we do still need to do some more and being in education, we're always reflective of our practice of how we can make things better. And so we're learning to see what are the steps that we need to improve our MTSS process. Intensifying our mathematics instruction, the reading scores were stronger at Gutierrez than our mathematics scores. So reading is definitely part of our common teacher time talk, but we're also going to look to see like what are the things that we need to improve our mathematics scores. One thing that I have the gift of is I get to go in all the classrooms and see the good things that are happening and the strong teaching that's happening. And I've been trying to work to get walkthroughs done for teachers to see each other and learn from each other's practice. So that is something that has a lot of moving parts, but I hope to do to help increase proficiency at Gutierrez School. And within all those things, knowing how I score something and how my neighbor scores something, that's calibrating, looking at student work, making the time to improve on our craft. So that is my reflection on our middle of the year and moving forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes.
You're welcome.
Good evening. I'm Colin Grimsey, the principal at Hugh Cole. Very, very pleased to be up here in front of this data that reflects the hard work of teachers and students and everybody pulling in the same direction. So these numbers are really outstanding. If you recall the four quadrants where everybody is in the top right, I am told by lots of different people at the district and different schools that that's the first time that's ever happened. And almost always, Hugh Cole is in the bottom left with low performance and low growth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's all me. I did it all. So yeah, a lot of things have contributed to that. I'd like to think we're just getting started. There's still a lot of work to be done. You can see the numbers here, and they do reflect a tremendous amount of growth just from beginning of year to the middle in mathematics as well. you'll notice in math in most of the schools, the proficiency levels are lower than they are in ELA. That's a national trend. And it is, well, it depends on who you talk to why that is. If you talk to me and some national experts that I've listened to, it's a curricular issue. And that's why I'm very, very pleased with the current curriculum that we have, because it does that magic triangle of procedure and problem solving and conceptual understanding. If you get those three things working all together, instead of just what's 2 + 2? Well, it's 4. And if you leave out the why, you're missing so much more. And then what do you do with that? That's the other tip of the triangle. So you have to have all three, and this curriculum does it extremely well. The other thing it does really well is acceleration. And this is one of my big ahas when coming to Bristol Warren about what acceleration is. It's not it's not remediation, where normally you would think of remediation as you've got a student who's 2 years behind grade level, you take them out of the class, and you hammer away at skills that they had 2 years ago. Meanwhile, the rest of the class is going on with the grade level curriculum. So then the big idea was, well, make sure that they get exposed to the grade level curriculum while you do that. And so now you've got basically a 2-track system for a student that is already struggling and far behind. And it just gets very confusing very quick, because for some part of the day, they're working on skills from 2 years ago. And then the other part of the day, they're working on skills they don't even understand and have no idea what's going on. So this acceleration is absolutely fascinating. And recent RIDE conference I went to listed acceleration as the number 2 most important and most effective school improvement strategy there is. It is the idea that, okay, if we are learning about fractions tomorrow, and student A, who's 2 years behind, he won't understand anything about what's going on in class tomorrow. So today, we can find out through the curriculum what skills that student needs in order to have a clue when it comes to fractions tomorrow. And that's what you do in acceleration block. Sounds so simple, but it is enormous. It has enormous potential. We're just scratching the surface of it at Hugh Cole, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens with it. So you'll also notice that a lot of these action steps across the elementary schools, there is some consistency there. And that is a direct result, I think, in the walkthroughs that the district does. We have already walked through 2 schools and are continuing on with that work. And so some of these ideas came out of those sessions, and the elementary schools principals got together as we formulated these action steps. So you'll see that some of them are, I think we changed the wording just a little bit to throw you off, but multi-tiered system of supports with Deb DiBiase, huge, very important. The way we identify students that are struggling, how we get them into the right room with the right teacher and the right materials at the right time to get them moving in the right direction. Prioritizing differentiated instruction during the acceleration block. I just talked about how important that is. Benchmark and calibrate student work in CTTs. So when the teachers get together at grade levels, we're taking a look at the work that students are producing and putting that up against grade level proficient work and seeing what we need to do next to get everybody to that spot. And finally, develop and implement a formative classroom walkthrough protocol. That's what we've been doing at the district level and to various extents at the school level. At Hugh Cole, we've done some math walkthroughs, but that is something that we need to get going on more so than we've done so far. So I'll be looking for the second half of the year to get those protocols up and running at Hugh Cole and to keep them going for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Tara McAuliffe, principal of Rockwell School. I'm not sure that there's anything left to say, but I will try. Oops, maybe not. Right? Got it. Our English language arts scores look pretty strong. I think Colin had mentioned it was a national trend for ELA to be higher than math, but that hasn't traditionally been the case at Rockwell. We've always had stronger math than ELA, and I think that the addition of HMH coming in has been a really positive impact, and the PD that went along with it and the thoroughness and the enthusiasm of the teachers that have really boosted the language arts scores. You can see that we went up 28% overall in proficiency from a 20 to a 48%. And I'd like to point out that grade K there, which started the BOI with 16% proficiency and is at 64% proficiency. That's pretty outstanding. In mathematics, again, we went up about 22% overall from the beginning of the year. And the math does look weaker than the language arts, except in grade 5, which came out just about even, nice even profile there. They had a 41% in ELA and a 43% growth in math. So that's lovely for that. Oops, didn't change the slide. Okay. Action steps. Like everybody, we're increasing the fidelity to the MTSS process and building a team and trying to train that team and training them in the way of the Bridge RI methodologies and doing the assessments of our team to see if we have things in the right place there. We are also using the services of Mickey O'Connell at our school. We're using her with the teachers that are newer to a grade level or newer to the school, and she's providing them some very personalized PD in their classrooms, co-teaching, co-planning with them as opportunities become available. And I think that's a very nice piece for people who are newer to the iReady world. We also are using the Bristol Warren attendance tools and the state of RI attendance tools. It's important for us to have our students in front of us to make sure that they're getting the benefit of the lessons and the acceleration blocks as well. They have to be there to get that, and we're hoping to get everybody well and in school and happy about that.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. So we'll start with KMS ELA, and we're really excited. It's the highest I think KMS has been in a while in Lake Collin. We're so excited that KMS is in the upper right quadrant for the first time since I've been here. So I'll take it. Thank you. So it just shows you how hard everybody's working, and thank you all for your support. If we go on to math is where we're rocking it. Excuse me. The math scores are almost, well, I think they are the best they've ever been at KMS. And this is due to a lot of different things that are happening at the middle school. It's mainly the robust Tier 1 instruction. We have that high quality curriculum in ELA that's been in place now. It's a study sync for about 1.5 years. And the teachers are continuing to refine their practice. The math curriculum with Curriculum Associates and iReady now has been about 5 years, and they're really coming together. We have connected with RIDE, with the Rhode Island Math Project, and we also consult with the iReady, the Curriculum Associate personnel. They come in and work with our staff. Some of the things that we've done, I think, that have really helped get us where we are is the addition of more collaborative classes in grade 6, ELA and math. Most of our grade 6 are collaborative classes that are co-taught with the special educator and the content specialist. The addition of the, excuse me, it's like the cold that won't quit. The realignment of instruction for our multi-language learners in our English classes. Now that we've aligned the co-teaching of the ELA teacher with the MLL instructor, we're targeting our population in second language acquisition. The addition of math workshop, which is an additional class that all students at KMS get as part of their daily schedule. It's 3 additional periods of math every cycle. So this has increased the math instruction in all grade levels. It has increased time on iReady and MyPath. So each student spends 1 period a week working on MyPath, working on improving their performance at their level. And we are continuing to improve and refine the math workshop to improve our Tier 1 instruction. So there's a lot happening. One of the big things we did this year is that we revised our master schedule that rose the contact time with teachers and students to nearly an hour for every subject to 58 minutes, which is up from 50 minutes. Took a little bit of creative scheduling, but we were able to make it work. And we have dedicated an uninterrupted common planning time once per cycle for the teachers for data analysis and planning. So I don't touch those teachers when they're in their common planning for other things, and they meet for an hour about once a week. And the additional literacy classes as well that go opposite the math workshop in all grade levels is providing for more time on comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. Those are our 2 weak spots, comprehension in informational text and literature. So we're really putting a lot of focus on that. And if you look at the data, you can see the results. So it's really encouraging. Like my colleague said, it's a journey. We're in the middle of it. We're in for the long haul. And I hope at the end of the year, we still see better improvement. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Morrell.
And now for Mrs. King.
Oh,
Last but not least.
And now for something a little different. So first of all, let me just say I'm really pleased and want to congratulate my fellow administrators on the fine work that they've been doing. As you know, all the hard work that they do leads to where we are today here at the high school, right? And so thank you for all your hard work. And let me share a little bit about what I have to share tonight. As you know, the high school is the short road to the next thing, which is college and career. At the high school, our accountability measures are the standards that ensure all our students have a minimum level of competency in both literacy and numeracy, enabling them to be successful for their future plans, both college and or career, measured by the SAT assessment. So we do currently utilize the iReady program as an interim assessment for beginning, mid, and end of year data. So I did include it on this slide, and as you can see, what you're seeing from beginning of year to mid-year is what I would consider to be a static, right? It's important to recognize this assessment. It has limitations for us at the high school when you look at the high-quality curriculum we've implemented in math, and you think about the standards that we are assessed on with the SAT. So when you look at ELA data beyond that, I think what informs our instruction is far more useful to us is the data we're beginning to really dig into and decide how we're going to use better. 58% of our current juniors were able to meet and demonstrate proficiency on the 2022 PSAT. So that is the PSAT they took last year, and they met the ELA proficiency of 480. This year, the same cohort of students took a ELA midterm that was a released SAT midterm. So it was specifically designed and aligned to what we know we are accountable for and what students need for future success. 67% of those students were able to meet that same benchmark for proficiency this year. And you'll see on the right-hand corner, one of the things you'll notice there, we are what is designated as a TSI and ATSI school, which is targeted supports and interventions, I have it, and additional or advanced or additional targeted supports and interventions. And what that says to us is that we have a subgroup that is performing below their peers. In our subgroup that we have been identified for in this area is our special education population. And so I was able to pull out through one of the spreadsheets that was shared with me from our English department chair. If you look at our current cohort of juniors, 6% of them are students who are identified with IEPs. And last year, 14% of those students were able to meet the ELA benchmark on the PSAT. And this year on their midterm assessment, which was an SAT assessment, 21% of those students were now meeting the 480 benchmark. And again, I say this with caution because this was a released item scored by our teachers. So it's as close to, what I don't want to say valid because that'll sound but as close to aligned to what we can expect going forward for the SAT as you're going to get. So to me, that's, I think, far more telling for us. When you look at math, and again, one of the things I would say limitations-wise is departments did their data dig a little bit differently. So I'm sharing with you, again, iReady data, which shows, a little bit of a, we see some increase in grade 9, and I want to say that's probably mostly related to the instruction in grade 9 Algebra 1, which is where the majority, a lion's share of our grade 9 students are. there is the algebraic thinking strand within the iReady. So they are receiving instruction in an area that is being assessed on that assessment. And then the rest looks a bit static. I have our PSAT information. 24% of that current juniors met proficiency on the PSAT last year. But the data is a little bit more difficult for us to dig into when you get into math, as it's not as clean, right? So grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11, they're not all taking the same class. So it's really hard to target all grade 9. Some are in geometry, some are in algebra. Grade 10, some are in geometry, some are in college algebra, and so on. So that's a little bit more difficult. What I will tell you is the math department did an amazing job doing a College Board protocol, breaking down the items. They did the College Board item analysis protocol, basically, and really were able to identify within the particular strands the areas in which deficits in instruction and or misunderstandings in comprehension existed. And then from there, we're able to make some decisions going forward for instruction up until going forward. I think what I'm most excited to talk about is really what's next, right? Because this has opened up a lot of opportunity for us. So I think, yes, we're going to focus our professional development on tier 1 and tier 2. Our goal at the high school is really to strengthen our collaborative and co-teaching models and differentiation of instruction. As we know, we have a subgroup of students that are not performing alongside their peers. And so that's a real focus and goal for me and for my team. We have the high quality curriculum implementation, and we're going to continue to refine practices and strengthen instruction in those areas. We are currently participating with RIDE in their CTAC, School Improvement Cohort. CTAC stands for, I wrote it down somewhere, but it's a comprehensive, targeted, yeah, I'll find it. But it's really, RIDE is working with districts across the state on school improvement to strengthen instruction, specifically around subgroup data. So our team has been meeting and working through our school improvement plan on this. Our goal is really to look at how we do interim assessments better. And so I've had conversations with Superintendent Riley, with my department chairs, really to figure out if iReady isn't the thing that's giving us the information we need to really inform our practice, what will? And we have right now, what we did at midterm was a locally developed, SAT designed, released items used assessment that really gave us some good information. So now the question becomes, is this something that we put in formally, systematically? Do we look for a tool that is better aligned to the SAT that will give us better information? But that's exciting because now we can really start to direct our instruction and be really progress monitoring the things we're held accountable for. I've been advocating for a couple of years, really excited to be able to say that starting with our upcoming 9th graders, we will be implementing the PSAT 9. That is an assessment given in October, which is outstanding because it's going to give us early information regarding where our 9th graders are on the aligned assessment. The scoring in grade 9 aligns to grade 10, which aligns to grade 11. It's not a progress monitoring tool, but it is absolutely a great diagnostic tool for us. So we're excited to be able to use that. And again, as all of my colleagues have said, we will be continuing to work with Dr. DiBiase on the strengthening and building of our multi-tiered system of support here at the high school. Thank you. Last
Thank
time I
you.
had the remote, I dropped it and broke it, so I'm walking with it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your victories as well as your struggles. It's important that we all own all of those, and I appreciate all of you for all that you're doing. Does anybody have questions or comments?
I've been here for 22 years, and I've never seen all of our schools in one block ever. So I want to congratulate all of the principals and the students and the teachers for the work that they've done to get us into that block, because I've just never seen it before. And I think it's phenomenal. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, Mrs. McBride. Mrs. Almeida?
This on? Okay, sorry. Thank you, everyone. Those were impressive results. I have a comment first for Ms. King. I don't know where she went. Okay. I just want to say, because I wasn't aware that you utilized a different tool other than iReady, because maybe iReady does not satisfy the needs. And I was just really happy and refreshed. It was refreshing to hear that you went out, or whoever went out, to look for something that was more aligned to get results that iReady may not have provided. So I just want to say that I thought that was awesome. Thank you. Okay. And then I had a question for Miss McCullough. Can you just explain what you mean under your action steps for increased proficiency? The first item, you state increased fidelity to the multi-tiered system of supports. What does that mean, and how would that increase proficiency, for example, in math?
You have to take the mic. Thanks, Mrs. McCullough. We need you on the record.
The MTSS process is formally, we're turning it over from the RTI process. That's response to intervention. So that's a process where every 6 to 8 weeks, all the teachers in the school can refer any child that they feel is in need of an intervention by look of data. And we meet and we set an intervention, and we try that intervention in that one specific area for 6 to 8 weeks. And then we come back to the table and see if that has made a difference in their proficiency, if that has filled the need. Is there a different need? Does it need to go someplace different? So we try to do that every 6 to 8 weeks. We have about 27 students in our population that we regularly, and for basically math and reading, but now we're adding other components when we move to MTSS.
Okay, I have one more question for you then, so hold on. So in that case, when the teachers get together and develop some type of intervention for the student, is that more, again, I'm just using math as an example. So is that the intervention, is that more driven with different ways to teach math, such as maybe hands-on, or trying to provide examples for students to use math in everyday living situations, or is this more like social emotional based?
No, it's math-based, but it might, you're talking about modalities, but it might be looking for the piece that's missing in their background knowledge.
Okay.
So they haven't caught on to, I don't know, groups of 10, and they might have to go back to the skill before that.
Perfect.
And there's different ways we can find different interventions. And sometimes it might be the classroom teacher, sometimes it might be the math interventionist, sometimes even we have a TA that we've trained in PALS, and going to do some work with Math Advantage. So different methodologies to backfill those gaps to make sure the student can understand that concept, because it's, spirals up in complexity.
Great, thank you so much.
Mrs. Reish.
Just one more quick compliment to all of our administrators and our educators for all of their hard work. I'm so heartened to see us all in that upper, I'm trying to remember my directions, upper right quadrant. Thank you. I also so much appreciate the really hard and fast analysis and all of the work that you're planning on doing to improve those test scores. I appreciate the reflectiveness and the insights. One other quick comment, my rising ninth grader is going to be so sad that she has standardized testing next year, but I appreciate it though. Thank you, everyone.
Mrs. Cabral. No, you're good.
Is she still here?
Mary Cabral. She's there.
Is this working?
Yeah.
So I just have a question. I'm just curious to know, I know you're so excited about, all the increases and everything, and I think it's great. I'm just curious, you mentioned that you were going to go to a conference or a symposium to reflect. So I'm just wondering, other than obviously everybody working very hard, the students, the teachers, probably the parents too, what do you think would be like the top two things? What will you tell them there when they ask you to reflect?
So the wonderful thing is that 2 teachers are going with us. So Chris and I will go, but 2 classroom teachers will go. And really, that's where the rubber meets the road. And so when we celebrate, we really are talking about the teachers who are working hard on the front lines every single day with their students and the hard work that they're doing. And so really, Chris and I think about it on multiple levels because we are teachers as well. But really, there's that classroom instruction. So knowing how to use your high quality curriculum really strategically and well. So understanding the pedagogy behind it and knowing how to move students in a really systematic way. And that comes into play with what administrators do to support us with schedules. So making sure that we have that separate block where when students need those prerequisite skills that we were talking about, if they're learning a particular skill in a unit that they're working on right now, what is it that they need to be able to access that tomorrow? So being able to work on that skill in that acceleration block, that prerequisite skill. So I think the most strategic thing that we have done as a district is really put high quality resources in the hands of teachers and help them really be effective with the supports that they need, whether that is training. So we have job embedded professional development. Through coaching, we have vendor training. We have also teachers collaborating with one another during CTT where they can share their practice and grow one another. And so all of those things are really meaningful. So there are many pieces. And so when you get to the end of that presentation, you'll see the gears that are there, but it's really about really strategic instruction that is vetted and it's tested and it's valid. And then using really reliable measures to track how we're doing with that so that we can calibrate each and every time we do a progress monitoring or we do a growth measure or we do a benchmark to say, okay, so now our students have grown X amount. What are the strategies for this student and this student? And their groupings fluctuate. Back in a day, you might be put in a reading group and you're in the low reading group and you stay there all the way K through 5 and you don't know why you're there, but you're there. And it's not like that anymore. Sometimes there are certain parts of math that are really dynamic for you, and then there are other parts where you need more support. And it's the same thing with reading. There are children who really have great background knowledge in certain areas, but then they need more support in other areas. And so keeping those groupings fluid based on the data. So everything's data driven and the curriculum is really tightly used in order to strategically give students what they need at a particular time. So I think those are the things that we're celebrating, is just that we've tightened up all of our resources and our personnel to really systematically and strategically support students, whether that they need to see a reading specialist or the classroom teacher needs some support, or there needs to be a collaborative with a special educator, or there's a resource that's needed. So just making sure that we have eyes on all of those things and that they're working strategically together.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments or questions? Yes, Mrs. Thibodeau.
Very much. Sorry. For all of this information and all of your hard work. I wanted, and I'm not sure if, because everyone seems to have many of the same strategies for improvement, I didn't know who to ask. But one of the questions that I have, and maybe Diane can answer this, or Anna, are most of these strategies what comes out of their school improvement plans?
So some of these things may be reflected in their school improvement plan. So these are some of the overall strategies we're using in the district. I would expect to see in a school improvement plan that we should see some differentiation among the schools because there's differentiation among the scores. But because these are some of the models we're all building together, these are kind of overall pictures. That's not to say other schools aren't doing different
They
things.
interpret them.
Right. So we will interpret it based on the needs of each school. So some of this stuff you should see in school improvement plans, but we should also see some additional more specific depending on the school.
So another question that I have, a lot of the elementary buildings were using Fidelity to HMH. And so I just would like a little further information on that.
So that's our new reading program, which is called Interreading, and the company that owns it is HMH. That's just our shortcut, I think, for saying the name of the reading program. But remember, we're only in year 2, and we use the word fidelity because we really want teachers to use the program as it was intended to be used. Because if everybody starts kind of ad-libbing and picking and choosing, then we don't know the strength of the program we've purchased. So at least for the first 3 to 5 years, it's always recommended that you have fidelity to the product that you've purchased before you start to differentiate and mix it around for the students in front of you.
Thank you. And so another question I have is the formative classroom walkthroughs. Many of the elementary schools are using that. Can you explain that?
So everyone's using that. So you may have seen in my Friday updates, we've done instructional rounds this week. So that's what we're talking about. So we're walking around, we're providing feedback, and really that feedback is for the leadership team. So we don't write down feedback for the teachers. What we do is we have a problem of practice the principal shares in advance, and we look for evidence of support of the work that they're doing, and then provide them with feedback on how they as leaders can improve what we saw happening in the classroom based on the problem they've identified, which again would be problems that would be highlighted in their school improvement plans, things they're working on overall.
And then one other question. So I noticed that Hugh Cole working on CTT, collaborative teaching teams. So I'm assuming that's collaborative classrooms between special education and regular ed? Or?
Nope, so that's the grade level. So it's the grade levels meeting together. So we are using
common planning time?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is some additional time at Hugh Cole based on some funds that Dr. Santa had in Title I. So we have a teacher leader for each grade level, and they get together and are starting some deeper work. Colin could probably speak deeper, but it's more like looking at student work, kind of examining, I think he mentioned, what does proficient look like? What does our student work look like? And how do we move our student work to that proficiency mark?
And I have one more question. Sure. Sorry. The early on grade level, so the achievement level descriptors. I'm going back to the last system that I'm familiar with, where it was grade level, below grade level. So is early grade on level like the beginning of the school year?
Correct. That's why we say the RICAS predictor is really the mid to above growth.
Okay.
That's, if we were to take the RICAS today, what I-Ready says is this number is where you would be for proficiency.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Great. I would like to say one thing because it feels pertinent as we're hearing the huge potential that we have. We have all of the pieces in place. And I think the potential of our district is sort of limitless at this point. So I think it's important to sort of let people know who weren't able to be there last week, that last week the Joint Finance Committee unanimously agreed to fully fund the budget as recommended by the superintendent. And the reason that's important is because it shows that the members of that committee have faith in our mission and vision, and they're, prepared to walk with us and to collaborate and partner with us as we strive to meet all of the goals in our strategic plan. So as part of that, several members of the Joint Finance Committee mentioned the fact that they had heard from the members of the public that they had faith in this school committee. So I personally would like to thank everybody on this committee for the work that they're doing and for their openness to having sometimes difficult but open and honest conversations, and to all of the members of the community for their input, and of course for our superintendent who juggled 2 jobs as CFO and superintendent, and presented beautifully and succinctly and with open transparency the budget in such a way that it was accepted with open arms. but that the work starts now, right? I hate to say that was a huge amount of work, but the true work starts now, and we've heard we have a framework for what that work looks like moving forward. So thank you all. So now on to the consent agenda. Item 6 on the agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the school committee and will be enacted by one motion. Is there anything anyone would like to pull for regular business?
Madam Chair, I would like to pull item E, trash and recycling bid.
Perfect. That said, item E is removed. Can I have a motion to accept the rest of the consent agenda? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, discussion and/or action items. The first item is to approve the OPM bid as recommended by the superintendent.
Thank you very much. I did invite PMA, which is our selected group, as our owner's project management services, subject to successful fee negotiations for stage 2, 3, and 4. You do have a review, a memo that I submitted to all of you, and I just want to highlight that the review committee unanimously chose PMA. I want to highlight a few things about them. They have this will be their first Rhode Island project, but they have done many projects in Massachusetts. Both Adam reached out to some folks he knew where they had done work, and I reached out to a couple of superintendents where they have done work, and all we heard were really rave reviews. So we're really excited to begin our work with them, and I welcome any questions. And as I mentioned, they're here to also respond to any questions.
Thank you. I would just add that the Vice Chairperson, Adam McGovern, couldn't be here, but as most of you know, he works in this world. So he asked me to share, and he and Mrs. McBride were on the initial interview team, and Mr. McGovern asked me to share that he supports the team with their OPM selection. PMA have demonstrated tools to manage the cost and the schedule. I just wanted to share his input. Anybody else have questions or comments?
So I do have one question, and this is, sorry. My question was about the budget, the cost. So I noticed that. Okay, I just didn't know if the alarm was going.
No.
No, we're fine.
Someone's going through the door.
Okay, so actually, the first question I have for the OPM, oh, there we go, is, so will a needs assessment be completed now that we have?
Stage 1 was our needs assessment.
So, okay, so they will use the needs assessment, the Jacobs report that was already established.
They will use the Jacobs report.
Okay.
That's the state evaluation. But then we just completed a stage 1.
Yes.
That we submitted to RIDE. We haven't received our approval on stage 1 yet, but that is the needs assessment. Our
Okay, so
current
they
needs
will use
assessment.
that, they won't create a new one.
Right.
Okay. And so once that is used, then the building committee will prioritize those items that they feel are identified in those reports.
Yep, we'll move on to next steps, looking at what the needs are and how we want to resolve those needs.
Okay. So then my other question is about costs. So in these packets, there was nothing on an explanation of costs, and I know that it's a percentage, but could you further describe all of that for us?
So RFP did not require a cost proposal because that will be a negotiation that happens with the OPM once you appoint the OPM. And it's based
Okay.
on the scope of whatever our project is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else?
It probably
Oh,
has.
Once you approve them, remember, they're not our OPM until you say yes. So once you say yes, then they will share what they've got for us.
So, yeah, so that was a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, make a
Absolutely.
motion to accept this proposal. And secondly, to just listen a little bit to what they have to say, because it was quite exciting to sit in the room and interview all the different companies. Everybody brought something to the table but they brought a little bit more of a spark than, and that was the spark we were looking for. So I just wanted to say that, as Adam had already commented. So I'm making the motion to accept the proposal, and I need a second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed?
Could we have discussion so we could ask all, so they could present?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you very much. I am Chris Carroll with PMA Consultants. We appreciate having the opportunity to present ourselves to the selection committee last week. I was not there, as away. This week Chad's away, so I'm in for Chad, so thank you. We have a lot of slides. I'm just going to snap through them quick. You guys have seen a lot of data tonight. You don't need any more from us. The project team that we brought with us tonight, Brian, Mark, Nick, Walt, and Sean, are all very seasoned project managers who have built many projects for us. Over the past 10 years or so, we've built over 50 schools. Many of those are full build from ground up. Some are roof repairs, boiler replacements. So we've seen all manners of projects in our history. We've lost our slideshow. Bear with me one second. The next slide is just a quick listing of the various projects that we've done. We seem to have lost our data. Okay, well, I can talk to it. As I mentioned, over the years, we've built in excess of 50 projects, totaling over several $1 billion. The group that we have with us tonight are all local to the South Coast and Rhode Island, and have built many different schools. The services that the project managers will provide for you that are most important, we'll be looking at managing the schedule. We'll be working with one of the first things we'll do is seek to go out and help procure the architect firm that will continue the next phases of the project. Once they're on board, we'll be looking at completing the study to determine the next phase 2, what schools are most needed for either renovation, addition, or rework. Just going back, that's the list of schools. There's not all on there, but there's a number of high schools. I would also add that at any point, if you would like to see or visit some of the schools, we could certainly arrange for that. There's a very large number of brand new schools that have just come online in the last 2 years or so. You got the next one? All right, thanks, Sean. So next, again, just managing project schedule. One of the most important things is keeping everything on track, on schedule. Unfortunately, in construction, time is money, especially with escalation. We've seen tremendous escalation over the past 3 years with the COVID impacts and supply chain. Again, once the designer's on board, we'll look at the strategic planning for the different schools, the different requirements, try to assess the most important first need projects that need to come out of the gate. Go ahead, John. And again, just looking at what we do in sequence, architect, go through the planning, coordination, existing conditions, space needs, construction delivery method. You kind of have 2 delivery methods where it's either a low bid, hard bid project or a construction manager that you'll bring on during the design phase to work collaboratively with the design team and project managers. Schedule, cost, and budget is essential for any project. We have to maintain that. And then is also, depending on if it's a renovation or a new school, the move planning and coordination, understanding the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, everything that has to be either moved or brand new. And then again, the end product is either a phased renovation and or new construction or addition. So go ahead, John. In looking at your project and your requirements, we know there's hard deadlines to meet as part of the RIDE requirements. So everything we do will be focused on getting through that process in a timely manner. And again, architect selection is going to be critical. One of the first things we want to do is work with the procurement folks to line up the RFS, request for services, make sure it's appropriate.
Chad
complete.
promised me I'd have that tomorrow morning, by the way.
Okay.
So I know he's on vacation, so he probably overpromised, but. All right.
And make sure that they're the right fit for your needs. That the architects need to listen to what you want and understand what you need and make sure it's reflected in the design. We go through the architect submittals to make sure they're the right firm. We try to highlight pros, cons, and kind of neutral factors with each of the architects that submits, and we critique those so that you have visibility towards it so you can make an informed decision. Necessity of construction, as we said, our job is to get you to the point where you're moving on to phase 2, phase 3. One of the things we look at is the existing conditions where spaces are undersized, overcrowded, inadequate, and try to make sure the design team is bringing those into the design, planning for it, and looking at it as we go forward. Again, just looking at the space, what's the existing facility and what space they need in a new project or a renovated project, how much square footage, what's the number of teachers, students, everything that goes with it in the square footage. Again, this just highlights the many different processes that we oversee as project managers. This is just kind of a quick summary. There are so many things that we do that you don't really see behind the scenes, but this kind of hits it at a higher level. Go ahead. One of the first things we'll do when we start looking at possible design options, we develop some preliminary estimated costs for projects looking at different scenarios. You may have a addition version, you may have an add reno version, or you may have a new construction version of the same project. And what we do is try to bring some science to it with actual costs based on the best information we have from the architect and the needs of the school. And then those options are presented to the school committee and the school and the district for your review, analysis, and selection on what you think is your best plan. So go ahead, Sean. Another thing, cost management. We will get a design, we'll get budgets and estimates, and they may be over budget. What we have to do is value engineer out items that are in the project that maybe not necessary. What we try to do is eliminate items that affect cosmetics. We do not want to affect anything that would detract from the educational program. So we're very targeted with the value engineering. We establish very detailed, elaborate budgets that at any time, any day, you can ask for, where do we stand on the budget? We have a live budget that's updated daily, weekly, monthly. So at any time, the committee or anyone that asks can be informed of where we stand on that budget. Again, our ability to communicate to you on the status of each project, where we stand to what was planned, what's occurring, and also what's important is the reimbursement, where we stand on the reimbursement coming from the SBA. We can get as complex as you want. We've developed some dashboards that are set up for each project. This is one of the things that Sean has done a lot of work on, establishing key information that you can go in and again see the live data, live status. There's pictures, progress information, and just a lot of data that's available online that we can help set up for you guys. Contingencies, each project, you'll have your construction budgets, but you always need to plan for unforeseen issues on the construction side as well as the non-construction side. We manage the contingencies just like a change order. We evaluate every request for contingency draw, maintain budgets, and make sure that any drawdown against the contingency is understood and approved and appropriate coming from the contractors. Go ahead. Once we're on site, when we do get into construction, you'll see these folks right in the construction trailers on site with the projects. We have other field staff that are also involved. But what we're looking at every day is understanding what the schedule is, what the budget is, but we also have to oversee the contractors, making sure they're performing daily to their requirements. There's many impacts to the daily performance that we monitor with our daily reports and report on. So at any time, we have the ability to go back on a project if there's a claim or there's a change order request. We can go back and look at the legitimacy of that type of claim or issue. Phasing coordination with your existing school. This is actually our Dennis Yarmouth school that we just opened. We were building a new school in the top left, but we had to coordinate with the existing school in the center, the district office down on the bottom left, and also we're building fields out in the back. We had to reconstruct new roads, new access, coordinate with the schools. We can't impact the operations of an ongoing school. We have to make sure everybody's safe and unimpacted. This was Carver Elementary. We built a brand new school on the right that was no more than 100 feet from the existing school on the left that was fully operational throughout the entire construction period. So, one of the more complex projects, Somerville, we rebuilt a building downtown that had three historical facades that we had to keep, and they were incorporated into the actual construction and design. That's right in Dudley Square. We also make sure that the construction work doesn't impact the school operations. On projects we've had to have them remove heavy equipment that created too much vibration, too much noise, too many problems that disrupted the school. Here it was a vibratory roller that we had to have taken off site. And we actually had language in the contract that restricted such a thing as this. So. Go ahead, Sean. Again, everything that we do, it's only as good as how much we're able to relay to you, keep you informed, have it available to you and the public so that at any time the status of the project is known, understood, and agreed upon. We find over the years that a project that has poor communication is often the one that has most difficulty with the public reception or perception. And again, there's many engagements with the district, the school committee, the teachers, the existing school, and how we relay it to the public. Again, this is just kind of a quick snapshot of some of the things that we'll do and how we work. Project communications, when it comes time to actually go out and get a project approved by the community, we've gone to open houses, parents' teacher nights, festivals, craft fairs. We set up informational tents with information boards and try to be there for Q&A, presentation of facts and figures. We can't go out and say, vote for the school. That's not our job and that's not appropriate for us, but we provide communication, facts and figures that make it transparent to anyone that has questions on the project. We also do online project communications. Some of the things we'll do is create data input tables for tax impacts. We'll work with the district on creating such data so that when it comes time, somebody has a house that's $500,000, what's this project going to do to me? You can have kind of a quick reference to see what it might imply on your tax bill. So again, what we're bringing to you guys is a very experienced team, a very experienced company that's built a lot of school projects. Being here tonight gave us the insight to how much importance you put on the teachers' performance and metrics. It's something that we also look to in our own performance to make sure that we're meeting your standards and your requirements. So we have questions if you want them, or anything we can help you with. So.
Thank you. I was going to apologize for how long you had to wait, but then I realized that it was a good insight, in fact, into our priorities and where we want to move forward. So you're welcome.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, actually. Out of curiosity, considering that you've finished a few projects as of recent, What kind of percentage of material construction cost increase are you noticing across the board since COVID strike?
I think we saw, and these guys can jump right in, but I think we saw early on increases, 10%, 15%. 13 to 15. It has stabilized a bit now. Yep. We're starting to see bids come in more closely aligned with the estimating. So it has stabilized. They're still high, but they're not escalating as much as they were.
I kind of figured we were somewhere in the 20% range almost.
Cumulatively, yeah. Yep. Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Mrs. Cabral?
Hello? So you run the whole project, but you don't provide the contractors? How are the contractors chosen?
So we're the first person on board your team. We go out, we solicit the architect. We'll be on board helping to manage and oversee the design process throughout the entire design. When the design approaches its 100% completion, we also go out to now help procure the contractor. It'll either be a general contractor or a construction manager. And we're on site on a daily basis overseeing the active construction, boots in the mud right there, trying to make sure that what the contractors are doing daily are to the intent of the design documents and everything is being done as should be expected. And if we see issues, we will call in the architects, identify non-compliant items, and the architect will either stop them or figure out a solution. We're also responsible for third-party testing. When you're pouring concrete, you need somebody sampling and testing concrete. When you're doing soil compaction, we'll have somebody on site doing soil compaction testing. And, there's a number of other third-party testing agents, commissioning, that will come up throughout. And we're kind of responsible for coordinating, getting them on board and overseeing them. And then the last thing that we do is the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, information technology. The architect will design it and procure it, but then it has to be delivered and installed at the school. We assist with that phase of getting it delivered, installed, placed, ready to open the school. Contractor has to punch list, complete the building. We help expedite the punch list with the architects and the contractors. So we're there the entire time, overseeing construction and all the little nuances that go with it.
Thank you. I have one more question, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but just for an example, if, as far as safety issues go during construction, you mentioned that you would be overseeing and making sure everything is safe. So if there was something that, was a safety issue, would the principal go to you or the contractor?
So on a daily basis, again, our crew is on site and we'll have one of these gents or what we call as a clerk of the works or a site project manager who will try to have daily contact with the school principal. And if there's an issue, you call us in the cell phone. We try to find out what it is, see if it can be remedied immediately, or take whatever actions necessary with the contractor to try to fix that issue. So if there's excessive noise, dust, it could be an unsafe passageway, whatever it is, we get called by the appropriate person at the project, and our staff in the field jump on it and chase it down and pursue it with the contractor. The contractor legally is responsible for the job site. So they have a whole safety plan that they have to develop and have it reviewed. But again, we're the watchful eyes. We are your representatives on that site, trying to help make sure everything goes properly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cabral. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have one more. I'm gonna get the uncomfortable one out of the way. All right, calculating your management fees. Are we talking percentages, cost per square foot, monthly fix?
Our typical project, what we look at is about a 3.5% of construction cost is our typical fee. That's the standard industry for what we're seeing. So,
Just wanted to find out.
Yep. No, it is
always
what it
the
is.
uncomfortable one. No one
Nope,
ever wants to
nope,
ask it.
nope.
But
And that is pretty universal. So,
just check it.
yep, no problem.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank them for taking the time to come down, to know about our district, and to know about some of the things that we might need. And for that, I'm very grateful. So thank you very much, and welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
And for all school committee members, you go to the superintendent, who then goes to the person who then goes to project management.
I already
We-
told them they're going to be my best friends. It's going to be great.
As school committee members, we don't interface unless we're invited. And I can assure you that sitting in that trailer at 7 a.m. is not fun. So don't look forward to being
I'm
invited
going to put
there.
my trailer right next to your trailer. It's going to be great.
Get out a construction hat because you're going to have to wear one.
I was going to say, we can't arrange tours at certain times when it's safe or appropriate, so.
Thank you. So I have a motion on the floor to approve the OPM bid from PMA Consultants as recommended by the superintendent. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Congratulations and welcome on board.
Thank you very much.
We're
Thank
excited. Next item on the agenda is 7B, the standard monthly financial reports as supplied by the superintendent. They're for information purposes only. Do we have any questions or comments on those reports? Nope. Great, thank you. Item C, to approve policy KH, public gifts to the schools, as recommended by the policy subcommittee for a second reading. Can I have a motion to approve? Second? Discussion?
I have a discussion, please.
Mrs. Almeida, and then Mrs. McBride.
I am in favor of the actual policy of the public gifts to the schools. I am still not on board with the amount of $1,500. Just to let everyone know where I stand. I had suggested, I believe at the last meeting, 500, and I just want to put it out there that I don't approve it as it stands with the 1,500 today.
Would you like to make an amendment to the motion?
This is already your second read. You can't do that.
Oh,
She can just vote no. She doesn't.
got it.
Right.
Last meeting?
That was to do this right.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Almeida. Mrs. McBride?
Actually, I would just be repeating what Jess said. I don't think it's appropriate to go above 500.
She agrees. Anybody else? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. The motion on the floor is to approve policy KH as recommended by the policy subcommittee for a second reading. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
The motion passes. Item D, I will hand over to the superintendent for the draft 2023-24 school calendar.
Thank you. So this is the same calendar you saw before. I just want to post it to our website. I'm still not going to have you give the final approval. I'm going to explain why for families. Our calendar does match the statewide calendar for vacations. So parents can go ahead and use this if they want to plan ahead for next school year. Staff can go ahead and use it. The only thing that has not been added to this calendar, because it is still awaiting some legislative changes, is the presidential primary. And there are two issues, because we would just stick it in the calendar and be done with it, except they are also considering moving the date because April 23rd falls on a Jewish holiday. And so there have been requests to move it from the 23rd, and they've put out several options for dates. So I don't have a date that I can put on the calendar and say, this will be the date of the presidential primary. We can't have school on that day. So once they finally do that, which unfortunately may not be until closer to the close of session, so the end of the school year. I won't be able to add that day. Once we know what that day is, Dr. Santa is ready with our PD days to plug in around that date. We just aren't able to put those in, but that does not have an impact on the starting of school or the ending of school or the vacation. So parents can use this to plan for next year. We're just awaiting that presidential primary, which then will allow us to plug in our PD days. It's official other than the presidential primary. So I'm going to post this to our website so parents can use it with the notes that you see on here about, subject to change based on the presidential primary, which is in a little asterisk down that Kate added.
Teachers are trying to plan a.
Same for
trip.
teachers. Absolutely. That's why I
They were
say
asking,
staff
I was
and
like, not
students
yet.
to plan for next year.
We're going to have a primary in the fall of this year.
We're going to have yes, but it's not a requirement that we close school on that day.
Good.
This is new, and we never used to close school for the presidential
I know.
primary because they vote right at Bristol and Warren town halls, but it's in legislation. That's why we're addressing it. So,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Yeah, Mrs.
Sure.
Thibodeau.
So I do have one question. So the last day of school will be the 14th.
Yes.
So does that make graduation the 7th?
Tentatively, yes.
Okay.
Yes, will be June 7th. Again, it was just June 7th a few years ago because that's my daughter's birthday, and I know I've been already to a couple of graduations.
I'm
on
sure I
that
have
day.
also, but yeah, I'm very excited. That's all right.
Planning ahead.
Any other,
Number 5.
any other clarification questions? We have one more item on the agenda, if everybody's good with the draft calendar, and that is the item that was pulled by Mrs. Thibodeau. It was pulled as item E from the consent agenda, and I like the alpha symmetry that it's now item E on the discussion, the trash and recycling bid.
I have a motion for discussion, please.
Hmm?
Need a motion so we can discuss.
So can I have a motion to discuss the trash and recycling bid?
No,
as
motion to move it, and then they can have discussion after you have a first and a second.
We already moved it.
Motion
We
to
took it off the consent.
move for discussion.
The trash and recycling.
The trash and recycling.
Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Now can I have a motion to approve the trash and recycling bid as recommended by the Budget Subcommittee?
So moved.
Discussion.
I would like to discuss. So I have one. I know that when we were in the budget subcommittee, we had asked if this had gone to legal for review. So that was my first question.
We don't send these to Mary Ann for a review.
So my second question is, so this is 5,000 over what we've budgeted. And so that was a concern that I had originally, that this was already $5,000 over. And then the request was if we had gone into the towns to see if the towns would take the recycling, and then we could renegotiate that cost.
So this is how we got this cost. I sent you an email earlier today that said the reason we have this low cost and it's only 1.2% above the last contract is because we are doing local recycling, both in Bristol and in Warren.
So I would like further information. One, should that not be in the contract itself? Should that language, I know that the contract doesn't start till July 1st, so there's no immediacy. But should that language be in the contract? Because we will be relying on Bristol and Warren to that agreement with them.
Can I ask a question? So this is just the bid.
Correct.
There then has to be a
Then there'll be a
Contract.
We don't have this is not a contract tonight. This is
Okay.
just awarding the bid.
Right.
Because I just reviewed it. I sat here and went through it
But if we award the bid at 45, if we approve this, then we are committed to the 45?
No, then we negotiate a contract
Okay.
with them. But I mean, this is the good faith estimate they're giving us, which Frank and I believe is a good price. It means Frank will have to readjust his budget to find the $5,000 in another line.
So the only, I mean, I am a nitpicker when it comes to municipal budgets. I try to stretch my dollar as much as I can. And so the only conflict that I see is that this is dated March 6th. And when I talked to the Warren DPW director, he did not mention this to you until after March 6th.
Well, that's what you told me, but Frank already knew about it.
I actually confirmed with Mega already has the accounts in both towns, so they're
Correct.
already utilizing those areas for disposal already. So
Right.
they're just going to piggyback on that.
But Mega doesn't recycle for the schools currently. They
No,
don't.
no, they're not for the schools,
Right.
but for the towns.
Right, they do for the towns. But when our DPW director spoke to Mega, they did not know anything about this today.
That's not what I got from the gentleman that I spoke with.
So that was today, because I was talking to the DPW director about this, because I said we were going to be discussing this tonight. So that's why he said you should be renegotiating.
Well, we're going to be renegotiating for the contract anyways. But I will touch base with Brian.
Okay.
And,
He is more than, I mean, they are
if he's got
very
a
willing to
contact over
take.
there that's different than the gentleman that I was talking to, then
Yeah,
most definitely.
actually, it was James Simeone.
I was speaking to a Christopher
Yeah.
I think Lambert was his last name.
But yeah, so anyway, Warren wants to take the recycling. They have no problem doing it, but contractually, it probably should be in the contract that we're making that commitment.
Of course. And like Mary said, this isn't a contract. This is just a bid. Yeah.
Something that I noticed, and that was that reading through the bid, this includes Mount Hope High School. And the town of Bristol already takes care of Mount Hope High School for recycling. So I don't know why it's in this bid.
Well, but for the trash. For the trash.
No, it's for the recycling. I looked.
Does it say it for both? Okay. All right. Then I might have to rewrite it. I'm just saying, I might have to have that.
I'm
in the
just, when
I
you're-
might have
when
to
you're
have that in
looking
the
at-
contract as not in there and use it as a point for reduction of.
Well, that was the only point that I was trying to make. I don't know how much we save when the towns pick up our recycling. I know how much the towns save when they pick up our recycling because it goes against their weight at the state
Oh, yes,
level.
both towns. Yeah, if they're taking recycling in both towns make money off of the weight that's taken in.
Right, but just take a second look at Mount Hope High School and how
Absolutely.
that's bid, because it's one of none of the Bristol schools are in the contract except for Mount Hope. And it's just something I noticed.
Yes, Mrs. Bullard.
So I understood this to be only addressing the trash, right? Because the towns are addressing the recycling.
No.
No, they're not.
No.
It's
Warren
trash, both
doesn't do
trash and
recycling.
recycling.
Bristol does recycling, Warren does not.
Sorry, I thought somebody said before that they had spoken to the towns and the towns were going to take on the recycling.
They won't.
No.
DPW.
Really? Oh, I must have misheard.
They don't come and pick it up. They will, instead of having to go to Providence to dump our recycling, we can dump it in Bristol and Warren, and then they will take it to the next.
Okay, all right.
Sorry,
All right, I
it's
see.
semantics.
Yeah.
They're-
No, I see.
This group's trucks will come and get it, but
Right.
they'll bring it to
Right, I think-
Bristol
got
or
it.
to Warren versus having to go to
I think
Providence.
Bristol picks up.
I think that's what Marge
Bristol
just
picks
said.
up.
That's what Marge
Yeah,
just said to
Bristol
Frank.
picks up, Warren does not.
Correct.
But in here, it does say something about Mount Hope, so we'll have to follow up with
I
that
will follow up
about
with that.
specific.
I apologize.
In the town of Bristol, as far as getting money for recycles, that only happens as long as it's not contaminated with trash.
Right.
True. With the separation of it.
Anything else? Any more trash talk? It's late. If not, can I have a vote to approve the trash and recycling bid as recommended by the Budget Subcommittee? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Mrs. McBride?
Before I vote on anything.
One nay, Mrs. Campbell, from Mrs. McBride. Nothing else on the agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Thank you all.